All right, if you've ever worked with virtual desktops, you absolutely know the pain of user profiles. They get bloated, they get corrupted, they basically become a total nightmare to manage. So today we're going to dive into a completely different way of thinking about this problem, the Thin Profile Management Methodology, or TPMM for short.
But first, before we get into the weeds, I just want to throw a number at you. And it's a number that should make any IT admin kind of sit up and pay attention. 99%. So what on earth could possibly be 99% of something so critical?
Well, according to the creator of TPMM, that's how much of a typical user profile is, and I'm quoting here, utter junk. Yeah, we're talking about all those temporary files, bloated caches, and old logs that do absolutely nothing for the user's experience. And all that junk, it's the real villain behind slow logons, massive storage costs, and those recovery processes that make you want to pull your hair out.
So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to break it all down. We'll start with the profile problem itself, then introduce this new methodology, TPMM. We'll see how it actually works, understand how it partners up with FSLogix, and then finish with the really good part, the big payoff for your environment.
Okay, so let's kick things off with a problem that pretty much everyone in the virtual desktop world knows all too well, the insane cost of profile bloat.
Look, tools like FSLogix are fantastic. They're a real game changer, but they are not a magic wand. Without the right strategy, those FSLogix containers just swell up. We're talking gigabytes per user. They basically become these digital junk drawers for every cache and temp file imaginable. And the result, you already know it, slower logins and a recovery process that is just fragile.
And this is where it really hits the budget. It is a double whammy of cost. You're not just paying for that expensive, high-performance storage to hold these massive profiles, you then get to pay a second time to back up gigabytes of what is, let's be honest, junk. For every single user, every single day. Ouch. So how do we fix this? Well, this brings us to this new methodology, TPMM. And the most important thing to grasp right away is that this isn't some product you go out and buy. It's a fundamental shift, a whole new way of thinking about profiles.
So at its heart, TPMM is a strategy that's built to work with FSLogix. Its main purpose is to transform user profiles from these precious, long-term things we have to protect into what they really should be, just temporary, ephemeral runtime state. You got to think of it more like a disposable workspace, not a permanent digital home.
And this one sentence right here, it perfectly captures the entire philosophy. A user profile should be so lean and clean that if it ever gets corrupted, you can just delete it and rebuild it in minutes without losing anything important. If that idea sounds terrifying, well, then your profile is already too big.
Okay, so that's the big idea. But how does it actually work? Let's get into the mechanics and see how TPM separates the important stuff, the signal, from all of that background noise.
This diagram gives you the 30,000-foot view. Now don't worry about all the lines and arrows, just focus right on the center, that one single executable, tpmm.exe. You can think of it like an air traffic controller for user settings, directing only the essential stuff where it needs to go. The whole process is actually pretty elegant. A user logs on and gets a fresh, clean default profile every single time. Then tpmm.exe instantly replays just their personalized settings. When they log off, it records any changes they made back to their home drive. And here's the magic step. The local profile they were just using gets completely deleted. Poof, gone. And you control this whole dance with just a simple configuration file. Now the secret sauce is really the separation. TPM is like a super strict filter. It only captures the essential data, the tiny little registry keys and app settings that define a user's experience. Everything else, all the bulky files, documents, and huge browser caches, that stuff is either redirected somewhere else or just flat out discarded at logoff. So where do these essential settings live? They're captured in these tiny, efficient, binary files called OPS files. These files contain only what matters, which means they're incredibly small, and they just sit quietly in the user's home folder, ready to be reapplied at their next logon. Now, if you're using FSLogix, I know what you're thinking. Does this replace my FSLogix setup? And the answer is a very clear and definite no. Let's take a look at how these two actually form a really powerful partnership. Think of it this way. FSLogix is the brawn. It provides that powerful container technology. TPMM, on the other hand, is the brains. It's the intelligence layer that tells FSLogix what to capture, making sure only the bare essentials, like stuff for Teams, OneDrive, or Outlook Search, actually end up in that container. Everything else is intelligently redirected or just discarded.
And here's the crucial transformation. Your FSLogix container goes from being this precious permanent archive that you have to protect at all costs to a lean, disposable, temporary cache. If it breaks, who cares? You just delete it. The next time the user logs on, a fresh one is created instantly. No drama, no longer stores from backup.
And all of this brings us to the final section, and really the reason this whole methodology is so compelling, the big payoff. It's all about making your environment faster, cheaper, and a whole lot more resilient.
The benefits here are pretty significant. You get way faster logon times with these tiny profiles. You see radically reduced storage and backup costs because you're not saving junk anymore. You get better performance during those morning logon storms, and, maybe best of all, a much cleaner, faster approach to disaster recovery.
And this quote just says it all. When a user's profile inevitably gets corrupted, and you know it will, the recovery time isn't hours spent trying to mount and repair some massive VHD file from a backup. It's minutes. You delete the old container, they log back in, and TPM restores their settings to a fresh profile. Problem solved.
So let's just recap the core ideas here. First, and this is the big one, profiles are just temporary runtime state. They are not precious data. Second, you have to rigorously separate your user's actual data from their profile state. Third, use that separation to keep your FSLogix containers lean and disposable. And finally, get into the mindset of rebuilding profiles quickly instead of restoring them slowly. By embracing these principles, you can fundamentally change the stability, the cost, and the performance of your entire user environment. So the final question this explainer leaves you with is this. When you look at your storage bills, your backup windows, and your help desk tickets, is it time to rethink your profile strategy?